A really deep welcome to this live part of the Mindfulness and Compassion conference. And I'm really glad you're here. And I'm so aware, I did the recorded part a little bit back, and I'm so aware of how much has been unfolding recently. And I just want to name that we're in a time of kind of trauma layered on trauma. And with that, the whole range of emotions that comes up, and so much of what we're exploring here is how do we relate to what's coming up in us in a way that really can bring healing to ourselves and to our world. So I wanted to start this session by saying that in the midst of this pain, we each have real medicine to bring. And the beginning of bringing medicine, and I'm particularly saying right in this moment, to the horrific suffering around the violence of racism, also bringing our medicine to the suffering on so many levels. The beginning of it is a real honest and courageous presence with our own experience. And I hope with the RAIN practice and with your mindfulness practice that you're more and more finding that capacity. So as you bring questions in, I want to invite you to feel free to really bring in whatever's up for you most immediately. And we can explore whatever's right here for you. So I'll begin with a question that I think a lot of people have, and this is Stephanie says, it's so hard to live in a world where so many people around you don't have compassion. I know the right thing to do is to show compassion for those without compassion, but it's hard when they continue to hurt you with their uncaring attitude. How do you continue to regenerate that compassion for them? So this feels like a really powerful question, Stephanie, to start with, that how do we respond when we see others that may not only be uncaring, but are actually causing harm? And what happens with compassion then? And my sense is, and I'll speak for myself, is that I often talk about the U-turn, and that when we see others that are not being compassionate or being harmful, that the first step is to deepen our attention to what's going on inside us with real interest and real care. And I know for myself, when I see others that are causing harm and that seem really cut off from any sense of empathy towards the suffering of others, when I make that U-turn, and by the way, that experience comes up daily. I mean, if we track the news of our current times, we're going to, especially those not necessarily close in, but those in the wider world, we're going to see that. Making that U-turn for me, I'll feel a sense of not only not compassion for them, but anger. I feel like a real anger. And so that's always a sign to me, okay, deepen attention even more. Because whenever there's anger, there's something under it. So I'll keep on bringing that mindfulness, that investigation, what's really here? And I find for myself that under anger, I'll often sense fear. It's like I'm angry at the militarization of the current administration. Well, under that fear, how many more people are going to get hurt? How much more violence is going to ensue? So there's fear there. And then if I stay like open to that fear, what I find under the fear is this caring in me that wants to protect life. And if I can come to that caring that wants to protect life, and really be present with it, then I can look through wiser eyes at the others that seem uncaring. And I can start to sense underneath their violent aggression, underneath their seeming uncaring, in some way, is a sense of powerlessness or fear or a need to control because of feeling of helplessness or whatever, but I actually can see more about others. And I find that when I've made that U-turn, then I can act. In fact, in these current times, opening to what's going on inside me leads me to much more engagement, in terms of social action. I can act, but it's not from anger at those that aren't compassionate. It's more because I care. And so I just want to bring that out. That's kind of a long response, but I feel like it's such an important question because there's so much going on right now where so many of us are feeling heartbroken by really the violence against Black bodies, hearts, and minds that's gone on for 400 some years, and in particular feeling the acuity of that right now, that we're all so many of us are from the other layers of trauma, very, very sensitive, that we need to make that U-turn. We need to have enough of a pause to get in touch with what we really care about so we can respond and respond effectively to what's going on. I hope that's helpful to you, Stephanie, because it feels like an important question. What would you recommend are the best resources to apply mindfulness in personal life and maybe some trauma and expanding in a broader audience? Books, websites, or any other resources would be helpful. I think that you'll find in some of the, I'll give you my website, has a lot on the basics of practicing mindfulness. I'll recommend to you on my reading book list because it refers to some of the best teachers that have written about mindfulness and also other websites. So thank you for that question. Sina says, I've been practicing rain for a while, thank you, and recently I discovered a deep belief that I do not deserve to be alive unless everything I do is excellent. I do not deserve to be alive unless everything I do is excellent. How can I allow something so horrible to be a wave in my ocean? It has caused me so much pain in my life, and I want to stamp it out. So I'm glad for this question also, because so many of us have core beliefs that have continued to turn us on ourselves or on other people and really kept us separate from fully loving, fully living. And one of the ways that I work with core beliefs, this is the most basic way. I have a phrase that really helps me. I say real but not true, and I use it a lot. Even if I'm not believing the phrase, I say it. And what it means is, real means, okay, this is a real belief. It's going on through my neural pathways here. But that doesn't mean it's truth. So no matter how much my body says this is true, there is some wise place in me saying, it's real but not true, Tara. It's real but not true. Now, in addition to that, because the body still really believes what it believes, we need to bring a healing attention underneath the belief. So for you, what that would mean is that when you sense that belief, okay, I don't deserve to be alive because I'm not being perfect, because what I'm doing is not excellent, or some sense of falling short and then being completely flawed and unworthy, to feel how that lives in your body. And I'm sure you've done that many times. I'm sure you've felt as you've investigated that there's a sinking feeling, there's a sense of shame, there's a sense of fear, and perhaps in the most deep way, how many moments that belief has deprived you of really living can bring up a deep sense of grief. Let yourself go to that deep sadness about the landscape of your life. I call that a soul sadness, when we really get how a belief has imprisoned our life. And there's a healing to going into a soul sadness, Because if we can really open to our sorrow for how much it's created a prison, then there's something in us that really becomes tender and compassionate. And that is the juncture of healing. So I invite you to go into that belief, feel how it's affected your life, feel the pain of that, and feel your compassion, your care, and what you wish for your life. And then offer that as a prayer of care. Please may I know this isn't true. Please may I trust my innate goodness. Please may I give myself permission to live. Whatever phrase helps you. And that's the nurturing in rain. And that's where the healing comes. So I wish you all blessings and know that you're not alone. Most of us have beliefs that keep us smaller than we can be. Yeah, so thank you for that. So here's a tricky question. This is from Lindsay, and I'm going to bring it in because of the times right now. Would you recommend doing RAIN in diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings for large groups of people who likely have no experience with the practice? So here's what I would suggest. There are different layers of how we work together in large groups, especially around racial issues. I want to say you can't do it right because we are all socialized to racism, every one of us. I mean, it's like fish in water. I mean, we're breathing the same water with the messages, and they go deeply into our psyche. Because of that, it's really tricky. We can't guide things and lead things without, in some way, we make assumptions about what other people are feeling. So it's really tricky. But one incredibly powerful part of doing these trainings is to help people get in touch with what they're actually feeling. So let's say you bring to mind a situation where you have felt like you're the one that's been excluded. Then RAIN can help you recognize that situation and the experience of feeling hurt and feeling pushed away. Allow it to be there. Investigate and sense how much of my life have I felt that sense, and what's it like in my body to feel that, and then offer some kindness in that way. For that piece of getting in touch with our feelings, RAIN can be really incredible. The challenge is then applying it to large group dynamics, and that's where it gets more tricky. I'm a white American who cares deeply about racial and economic justice. I've been trying to find a way to pay attention to the current protests in the United States while also maintaining my own spiritual and mental health. Are there any mindfulness practices you recommend for paying attention to the news with compassion and for undoing racism within my own self? Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'll share a bit of what is working and helpful to me, Travis, and that is I try to modulate news some because I think too much news can be overactivating, but I feel like it's important to be tapped into what's happening. I ran across an African proverb that really touched me. It goes like this, that when a village does not embrace a child, that child will have to burn the village to find warmth. I'm going to say it again. When a village does not embrace a child, that child will have to burn the village to find warmth. Now, what does that mean? I mean, what do we feel into that one? And I think we all know it in a very kind of deep personal way, that when we've been pushed away, when we've been rejected, something in us out of that hurt pushes back, rejects, separates further. To protect ourselves, we have to. And that what we can see, these kind of cycles of violence is what's happening, that for these 400 years, we have this legacy of violating Black people and we're still fighting the Civil War. Racism is really the core wound in our society. And so we're seeing yet again the kind of reemergence in our collective consciousness of this horrific festering wound. And so then the inquiry that we all have is how do we hold that? How do we relate to that? And how do we respond? And for myself, there's several steps. And the first I've mentioned, which is open every day, every moment that you can be aware that is the time to be with yourself, to really what you're actually feeling, not what you should be feeling. For some who are white, it's guilt. I haven't done enough. For others, it's defensiveness. Why am I being blamed? It was, it's the white race, but it's not, I didn't do anything. And for others, it's a feeling of heartbrokenness. So open honestly to what you're feeling. We have this model of truth and reconciliation that has this real wisdom to it, that if we can speak truth, we're on our way to healing. And first we have to do an inner truth and reconciliation, where we recognize what's coming up in us. It may be anger and it may be hatred. I'm about to do a talk on this. We need to open to it, feel it, be with it fully. So that's the first step, is be a compassionate witness to what's actually going on for you. The second step, if you want to undo racism, is to have your primary filter with others, and particularly the child who has not been embraced. What's it like for you? Find out. Really extend yourself. Extend yourself through what you read and listen to and who you talk with. We tend to congregate with people who are most like us. White people with white people. Class, we tend to congregate with people in our own class. Extend yourself. And with that inquiry, and I think civil rights activist Ruby Sales said it beautifully, to ask, where does it hurt? How is it that so many Black people report that every day they feel the violence of racism? How is that? So to extend, what's it like for you? And then the third step is to say, how am I participating? And this is the tricky part, because again, you can't be in this society and not be imprinted by the sense of whites are superior, people of color are inferior. That's just a deep imprint. But what we can do is be aware of it, so it becomes less and less of a filter. There's so much research that mindfulness helps us to step beyond and really be in relationship in a much more clear and present way. How am I complicit? And I can say for myself, it took me a long time to really sense what it meant to just take for granted the privilege of being white, and how many doors would open, how many doors would not close. And I remember once going, I was on a vacation with my husband going for a swim, and we swam out to this island, and it was like a breeze. I felt athletic and graceful, and it was really moving well. But coming back, I got completely exhausted, and it was, I arrived on the beach, just completely wiped. And I realized I'm not aware of how many currents are carrying me in the direction that I want to go. So how am I complicit? By not challenging that, by not seeing that, by not actively working to create a society that's more just. And then the last step, and I realize I'm taking my time on this one because it feels so important, is that this is the time that it's broken open. And I think many people feel, as I do, that the violence of racism has pierced us in some way at another level. This is the time to act. And we each have different ways to act. We have different medicine to bring. but to act in a way that really steps up for the child that has been hurt. I'll share with you, one of my friends, a Black man, was in Lafayette Square on the day that that Trump brought in all the, military and dispersed the crowds with tear gas and rubber bullets and flashbang, that whole thing. Well, he was there, and then, as you know, Trump did his, public, with the Bible kind of appearance. Well, he went back the next day, and there were more people in Lafayette Square. It was the opposite of discouraging. It encouraged more people, and everybody was chanting Black Lives Matter. And he was standing there, and then he kind of decided he'd really take it in, and he looked around, and he said, that's when I first really started weeping, because most of the people around him were white people chanting Black Lives Matter. And he said to me, Tara, that was the moment that I really felt I was more of a human. And I feel like it's up to white people to step forward and embrace the child in the village that has been really brutally pushed aside. And we're talking about, in particular, racism right now, but there are many levels of who's vulnerable in our society, and I want to acknowledge that. And in a deep way, we are all the village, and we all have a sense of what it's like to be that child. And waking up our consciousness, waking up compassion, has to do with being able to enter into the experience of all the different parts and really bringing our awareness and our tenderness to that. So I think that's as many questions as I can take, because we're at the end right now. I'd like to just invite you to take a pause for a moment and close your eyes and notice whatever's going on inside you. And notice what happens if you simply offer kindness to what's right here. It could even be that you gently put your hand on your heart. Just offer some kindness. And from that heart space, that which cares, just including now those who are the targets of racial violence and injustice. And in whatever way fits for you, really to offer that care, that Black lives truly matter, that brown lives matter, Indigenous people matter. But not to make it like, okay, all lives matter, to really get the very particular and brutal experience of Black people in this country. To hold in our hearts now all who are vulnerable, their health, their livelihood, all who are suffering. To sense this heart space as wide as the world, so you can hold the world's pain. We can hold it together. It's a shared heart space. May we all feel that belonging to the village. May we all feel held in loving presence, filled with loving presence. And together, may we create a more loving, just, and peaceful world. Thank you, my friends, for being part of this and for what you bring to our world. Blessings.